In today's video, we're going to be discussing some NHL trade rumors focusing on the Edmonton Oilers, who are in the market to add another scoring forward. Plus, John Tortorella sounds off on officials, and we know who's going to the All-Star game. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of news updates to discuss today, and I want to kick things off with the situation involving Columbus Blue Jackets head coach John Tortorella, who's obviously been known for his time in the NHL, being a very fiery personality, not afraid to speak his mind. Certainly somebody who we've seen explode multiple times in public with the media against the league in different situations over the years, and he certainly had another situation the other night where he certainly sounded off on the league and the officials after the Blue Jackets suffered a loss, which he feels they very well could have avoided. Plus, they ended up having their main goaltender, Jonas Korpisalo, be injured. To summarize what happened, essentially the whistle blew with 19.2 seconds remaining on the clock, but for some reason the clock continued to run and went down to 18.1 seconds. Once Tortorella complained to the officials, they refused to put any time back on the clock, which he was certainly very upset about. Ultimately, they ended up scoring right at the end of the overtime period, but unfortunately, the puck crossed the line after the clock would have expired. But if they would have put that second back on the clock that he was complaining about, they would have had a good goal and they would have had an overtime win. Instead, the game goes on to a shootout where his goaltender ends up getting hurt. So not only did they end up losing the game, but they lost their goaltender, who's a big part of their team, who could be out apparently for multiple weeks here, depending on the extent of the injury. So he certainly had plenty of reasons to be upset. Of course, as much as I think he had lots of valid points, unfortunately, you can't sound off like that without getting repercussions from the league. I know there has been word that Colin Campbell apparently has spoken to Tortorella, as well as the Blue Jackets organization. Tortorella has since made some comments insisting that he kind of regrets what happened and wishes he would have handled things behind the scenes a little bit more. But ultimately, though, I do think he had some valid points, and I think that the league does owe an explanation as to what happened there. And ultimately, the War Room in Toronto can also intervene if necessary, but typically that's not something we see when it comes to the clock or a simple issue of that nature. Normally, the referees can look at it with the timekeeper and get it fixed in-house without much issue. Quite often in critical moments of games, they often review the clock just to make sure that it is right, so that the game can be decided appropriately. So I guess we will see if there's an actual fine or suspension or anything like that nature against Tortorella. All Colin Campbell has insisted right now is they've had a conversation and the league is dealing with it, is what he said, but there hasn't been any word as of yet if there's going to be an actual punishment or of any kind. I would think probably at most a fine. As we mentioned as well, we have the names of the players that are going to be heading to the NHL All-Star game. So those rosters were announced today. Of course, there is a last man standing vote that's going to be taking place here as well. So there will be one extra player added to each divisional team. So there's one player from each team that's on the ballot that can be voted in for that. So there'll be one extra player added. But let's take a look at so far who has been named to the NHL All-Star game here so far. Let's start here with the Atlantic Division, led by Captain David Pastrnak. They also have Boston goalie Tuukka Rask. Buffalo Sabres are represented by Jack Eichel, who's having a phenomenal year. The Red Wings are represented by Tyler Bertuzzi. The Florida Panthers have Jonathan Huberdeau, who's having a fantastic year as well, on pace to set a new record for point total in a season by a Florida Panther. Montreal has Shea Weber, a captain on the roster. The Senators have Anthony Duclair, who's having a tremendous breakout season, on pace for 40-plus goals. We'll see if he actually gets there, but currently that's what he's on pace for. The Tampa Bay Lightning have defenseman Victor Hedman representing them in the All-Star game. And the Maple Leafs have two players with goalie Freddie Anderson and then, of course, center iceman Austin Matthews. Now let's jump over now and take a look at the roster for the Metro Division. Of course, that includes defenseman Dougie Hamilton of the Hurricanes. We've got Seth Jones and Jonas Korpisalo of the Blue Jackets. Of course, not quite clear if Korpisalo is going to be able to take part. Depends on how he recovers from that injury. I guess we will see a little bit closer to the time if he's able to return in time for that or not. The New Jersey Devils will have Kyle Palmieri attend the All-Star game. The Islanders have Matthew Barzal. The Rangers will be represented by Artemi Panarin. The Flyers have Travis Konechny. The Penguins have Jake Gensel, and the Washington Capitals have John Carlson, who's having an awesome year, leading contender for the Norris Trophy, and goalie Braden Holtby. Now jumping over to the Western Conference in the Central Division, the Blackhawks have Patrick Kane. We've got Nathan MacKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche, Tyler Seguin of the Dallas Stars, Eric Stahl will represent the Minnesota Wild. The Nashville Predators will have their captain Roman Josi and take part in the event. The St. Louis Blues have a trio of players, and of course they're the host team as well. They've got Ryan O'Reilly, goalie Jordan Binnington, and captain Alex Pietrangelo. And then the Winnipeg Jets have a pair of players on the roster as well, including goaltender Connor Hellebuyck and forward Mark Scheifele. Now last but not least, let's take a look at the players for the Pacific Division, who will have Anaheim Ducks forward Jacob Silverberg, goaltender Darcy Kemper of the Arizona Coyotes, Calgary Flames forward Matthew Tkachuk, along with Flames defenseman Mark Giordano. The Oilers dynamic duo Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, of course, in full effect there. LA Kings forward Anze Kopitar will be at the All-Star game, as well as Sharks captain Logan Couture and the Vancouver Canucks Elias Pettersson. So we will see who the last man standing ends up being for each division. That'll be announced here over the next week after New Year's. Now, of course, the other items we want to take a look at today was the Edmonton Oilers and some potential trade targets. We have information coming from Elliot Friedman, who was on a radio hit talking with Bob Stauffer about some potential forwards that the Oilers apparently do have some interest in. And the main ones they were discussing were Brandon Saad of the Chicago Blackhawks and Tyler Toffoli of the Los Angeles Kings. Now, there's also some other information suggesting that they do have interest in Jean-Gabriel Pageau of the Senators as well, which is a little bit more of a unique case because it's not quite clear if he's going to be re-signing in Ottawa or not. They've been able to keep negotiations kind of pretty quiet for what the media has access to there. Of course, in the past, we've seen many of the Senators' situations with their pending UFAs be very public, and they've really made a conscious effort for not to have any information leaked out. So we're not quite clear how things are going on that front, but it certainly would make a lot of sense for a number 3 center for the Oilers would really strengthen them down the middle. Now, of course, when it comes to Brandon Saad, the main issue there is that he still has a year on his contract at $6 million, so that could prove to be very difficult for the Oilers to work in a salary cap situation. There might have to be some kind of a take back from the Blackhawks to move Saad to Edmonton, whether it be salary retention or perhaps taking another contract off the Oilers roster to make the numbers jive. But where he's not a pure rental player, he's not a pending UFA, it's not quite clear exactly how that would work. But I can see how they may have some interest. I mean, of course, Saad can be a strong physical winger. He's got a pretty solid acumen behind him, scoring 20-plus goals multiple occasions. I'm not quite sure exactly Brandon Saad's the perfect player that they're looking for, but I do see how he could be a fit and certainly play in their top 6 and certainly strengthen them and give them some more depth on the wing with some much-needed scoring. Of course, Tyler Toffoli might be the better choice there. Hard to say exactly what the price tag would be from the LA Kings to acquire Tyler Toffoli in Edmonton, especially where they're a division rival. They may not be too keen on helping a division rival get stronger, but ultimately the Kings are going to be out of the playoffs. That's pretty much a foregone conclusion. And of course, the future of Tyler Toffoli in the franchise appears to be coming to an end anyway. So I guess we will see what they decide to do. But Toffoli would be a good fit for the Edmonton Oilers. Of course, he's got a lot of great experience that he has, the time he spent in LA was certainly very valuable. He has Stanley Cup pedigree. He knows what it takes to win in the playoffs, and certainly could help with that experience to help them get over the hump. The only issue here with the Oilers and other teams in the Pacific Division is that the race is really, really tight. I know the Arizona Coyotes, of course, acquired Taylor Hall, paid a pretty good price tag to do so, and now they've lost a few games in a row and they're really not all that far from really being even a wild card spot or potentially being out of the playoffs. Those teams are pretty crammed tight together in the standings. Of course, Vegas is now in first place. Between Vegas, you get the Coyotes, the Oilers, the Canucks, the Flames. There's really a big logjam there, and either a winning streak or a losing streak of even only a handful of games, one way or another, could really move you up or down and out of the playoff picture completely. So to make a big acquisition certainly could prove to be risky and might prove not to end up really working out. I mean, I hope for Arizona's sake that the Taylor Hall acquisition does work out, but it certainly does pose some risk right now because there's not, like I said, they're not far from falling out of the picture, and the Oilers are not going to want to have the same thing happen to them. Now, Elliot Friedman also mentioned in this radio hit that he feels that internally the Oilers have felt that in the past that they've traded away too many draft picks, and they might be very cautious about moving additional picks and any kind of trades to make an acquisition here of any of these types of players. Now, when it comes to Toffoli or a player like a Brandon Saad, for example, I would think that those teams are likely going to want a pick of some kind going back because they're both in a situation where they're trying to get younger and basically a bit of a rebuild. I mean, the Kings are definitely in a rebuild mode. The Hawks are not really officially there, but are certainly trying to get younger for sure, and having some younger players on the roster or a draft pick was probably most likely what they'd be looking for should they decide to trade the veteran forward. Now, in the case of Pajot and in Ottawa, if they went down that road, I would think that the Senators would be looking for something similar as well. They've accumulated a lot of picks and a lot of prospects over the last couple of years, and they're trying to get these young players, up to speed here, up to par, to help them become a stronger team. At some point down in the next few years, they very well could be a really strong team with all the prospects that have accumulated if they develop and live up to the expectations that have come with them. So I guess we'll see what the Oilers do, but certainly 3 forwards that Elliot Friedman feels the Oilers are very interested in to different degrees, obviously different price tags. But we'll see if the Oilers go ahead and make a risky acquisition or not. I mean, for right now, I'd probably hold tight a little bit and try to get themselves a little bit more secure playoff spot before we see, a bigger type of acquisition out of Edmonton. I know there is some pressure to make the playoffs, but considering where they were last year, I'm not sure Ken Holland is really going to want to pull the trigger and jeopardize the future too much just for a rental player on the roster. And at least with Brandon Saad's case, they'd have him around a little bit longer, more than 1 year, especially if Chicago would retain and make things work a little bit better with their salary cap situation. So let me know if the Oilers did make an acquisition in the forward position. Which of these guys do you think makes the most sense? And let me know what your mock trades would be. What do you think they'd have to be prepared to give up to make the deal work? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching and I will catch you next time.